Hi there everyone, my name is Mandy, and this is Method to My Madness. I've been thinking about doing a video blog about my mental illness for a really long time now, but I've always come up with one excuse or reason why I couldn't do it. One of those is that I don't have the best skills when it comes to shooting and editing videos, so I'm sorry if there's issues with any of the videos. I'm making this vlog to create an environment where people can ask questions about mental illness. Within the past year, I have opened up a lot about my mental illness to strangers, and I've found that 9 times out of 10, they have questions. But in 8 of those 9 situations, they feel they shouldn't ask them because they're inconsiderate, rude, insensitive, what have you. But I would rather have people ask me than go around with these misconceptions in their heads. Now I will say I'm not an expert. I'm only an expert on me. I only have my own experience to go off of. And although that does include some education in psychology, I'll probably be focusing mostly on my personal experiences. This first video will just be my personal background with mental illness, and with any luck there will be a few questions for me to answer for the next one. I'm hoping to be doing these videos once a week, but that's not set in stone. Before I begin, I feel I should note that I acknowledge that I have not had what would be considered an average life. It's been pretty dark at times. This is important because it shapes who I am as a person. But due to this, I will issue a trigger warning. I'll try my best to stay away from things that may be triggering, but some subjects can't be avoided. Okay, let's get started. My first experience with anything mental health related was when I was 11 or 12, not quite sure. I was put into therapy because it was decided that I needed to cope with past events. I think this was good and bad. It was bad because now I had more proof than ever that my life wasn't normal. I had therapists telling me names for things I had experienced I didn't even know were significant enough to have a name for. I thought everyone went through these at one time or another. Most of all, therapy gave me validation for the way I was feeling. While this was good in the long run, it was actually overwhelming at the time. I had spent years being told I would never amount to anything, that I would never be good enough, and that I was worthless. Suddenly I had someone telling me not only were these things not true, but that I shouldn't have been told them in the first place. It increased my feelings of despair because I was still living in the same toxic environment that the therapist was telling me I didn't deserve. I should note here that I changed names and relationships of people who were saying these things, so the therapist had no idea who I was actually talking about. I had been convinced that if I said anything against the people I was living with, I would end up in some orphanage or group home and it would be 100 times worse than it was at home. I'm not saying that therapists were completely innocent, because they weren't. During my time going there, I had to hide bruises and explain away injuries, which I still feel they should have seen through. Regardless, things in my personal life were getting worse. I was convinced that I shouldn't be alive, and that I was making those around me unhappy, and that no one cared enough to give me a reason to stay. I made plans to take my life. I had everything ready. The pills hidden in my room, the note written. But I confided in one person, my best friend since first grade, Timmy. I told him what I had planned, and that I would miss him, but I just couldn't take it anymore. The day I planned to end it, February 12, 2003, I got pulled out of class in the middle of the day. Timmy had told someone he had turned me in. Can't really say I was mad at him. I was just disappointed that I would have to delay my plans. I was sent to a mental institution where I was kept for 9 days. During that time, I was diagnosed with depression and put on an antidepressant. My father and my stepmother, who were the source of my current despair, seemed really supportive when they came to visit me at the hospital. I had hoped that things would get better, but I was wrong. When I was released, the hospital gave me a month's worth of medication and sent me home. There was no change, except now there was anger for the hospital bills. When the 1 month medication was up, there was no refills. I was told that I needed to do more manual labor, that if I kept busy enough, I wouldn't have time to think about being depressed. I was taken out of therapy, being told it was a waste of time and gas money because they didn't actually pay for it. If asked at the time, I probably would have stated my depression had gone away. But looking back on it now, I see it would be closer to truth to say it was still there. It was just ignored. I couldn't sleep some nights, while other times I would sleep for 10+ hours if I was allowed. And I was always so tired. I had anxiety attacks, where I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was dying. But I was told I was just trying to get attention, so I stopped mentioning them. There were a few months where I stopped eating, where I would eat one meal every 2 to 3 days just to keep going. The signs were all there. I just wasn't in a situation where I could get help. There were major life events in my life, like almost dying at age 17, that changed my living situation. I was taken away from that toxic environment and given a home with strangers. Now don't get me wrong, they were great people. But it's important to note that they were strangers because they didn't know my behaviors had been happening for years. So even though it was definitely better to be out of the bad situation, I still went without help. Every time I would break down crying or basically shut down, it was contributed to me being out of my home situation. Big life changes happened, got engaged, graduated high school, got a job, moved out on our own, got married, started college. I still had episodes where I wouldn't sleep, or I slept way too much, but I brushed them off and said it was because I was working full-time while I was going to college. I never really got my hunger back, so I would forget to eat if I wasn't made to do so. I made excuses for why I never wanted to leave the house, why I never wanted to do anything. I got these tension headaches, and I got a prescription for them that all made me sleep, and I took it every chance I got. I preferred unconsciousness. I started having stomach issues, which weren't diagnosed for almost 3 years. I used that as an excuse as to why I was skipping class, why I couldn't pay attention when I was there, and why I kept missing work. I blamed my constant sadness on my crappy, stressful job. It wasn't until I got a better job, a better place to live, less stress, and my stomach issues were resolved that I realized I was still sad all the time. No, I shouldn't say I was sad, because it was complete hopelessness. I would cry for hours, hiding in the bathroom so no one would hear and know my secret. I felt weak, and because I was studying psychology in school, I felt like a failure for feeling this depressed. I finally broke down and saw my school psychiatrist. Our very first session, I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder and an anxiety disorder. I received a prescription for an antidepressant, and I tried to will it away. I tried so hard, but it only got worse. I was given a prescription for anti-anxiety medication to take when I had my ever-increasing anxiety attacks. I was given a new antidepressant because the first one wasn't helping. I was missing more school and work than ever, mostly because I couldn't convince myself to get out of bed in the mornings. There were some mornings where my loving husband would make sure I got up, got dressed, and left the house. But just driving to school would have me in tears, and I would end up parked somewhere crying until I fell asleep again. I hated my life. And more than that, I hated what I was doing to the life of those around me. I've had a voice in my head for many years. It's a male voice, so I know it's not my inner voice, but I've always just assumed he was the voice of my depression. I refer to him as Dick, short for Richard. He always tells me that I'm worthless, that I don't deserve to live. On December 18th, 2014, I couldn't get out of bed. We were supposed to go see my in-laws for an early Christmas celebration, but I felt so terrible, I just wanted to sleep. My husband wouldn't leave me alone, knowing my suicidal thoughts and fearing for my safety, so he stayed home too. He called his dad and told him my stomach was bothering me, so we couldn't make it. Now, I've considered my father-in-law my father for a very long time, almost since I met him. He was one of the nicest, kindest, caring men I've ever known. He loved me as though I was his own daughter, and I had denied him a Christmas celebration with his son, what unfortunately would turn out to be his last Christmas. Though of course I didn't know that at the time. I felt he deserved to know the truth. So I texted him. I told him everything. My depression, my suicidal thoughts, my hopelessness. In that text I asked him to not be mad at my husband. That I just didn't want him to be disappointed in me. But I didn't get a reply. If I was in my right mind, I would have realized that just because we didn't show up doesn't mean the rest of the family didn't show up. And he was probably busy with them and didn't even get the text until later. Now I want to make it clear I don't blame him or anyone else for what I did next. It's all on me. It was my choice. And it had been building for a long time. That voice, Dick, told me not for the first time that everyone would be better off without me and I should just end it. So I listened. Roughly a month before I had decided to end it, I texted my goodbyes to a select few and then went to swallow all my pills. I was stopped before I even got the lid off the bottles. This time, I thought I had learned my lesson. So I downed all of my sleeping pills, sent a goodbye apology to my husband, then went to down all my anxiety pills as well. My husband got to me before I swallowed the anxiety medication. Cops were called. I was put in an ambulance. I was crying the whole time. I just wanted it all to be over. Evidently, the sleeping pills were ineffective because they didn't even bother to pump my stomach. I was transferred to a mental hospital again, the same as the first time, although obviously I was sent to the adult ward. When I was checked in, they took my necklaces, my shoelaces, and everything else I could hurt myself with, and I was given a journal. My very first entry was, "I'm such a failure, I can't even kill myself properly." Everyone says that the moment after you do something take your life, you regret it. Why don't I feel that way? I only regret that I failed. The next day, all that changed. My therapist got my husband on the phone and had him tell me how it felt to have found me like that. Hearing the anguish in his voice as he told me how bad it had hurt him and how he couldn't imagine his life without me, and hearing him break down and cry struck me hard. I have witnessed this man cry less than 10 times in the 14 years I've known him. I knew at that moment that even if I didn't believe I had a right to be on this planet, he believed I did. And I owed it to him to try. After everything he had done for me, after everything he had been through with me, I knew I could never put him through that pain again. So I promised I wouldn't. I wish I could tell you it was all uphill from there. It hasn't been. I still have suicidal thoughts. Sometimes suicidal hallucinations, where I've seen a blade sticking in my arm with blood running down, or seen myself step in front of a passing semi-truck. I still have them, but I do my best to ignore them, for him, and for everyone else that cares about me. That voice hasn't gone away. If anything, he's gotten meaner. And now, he's no longer alone. There are other voices, and sometimes visions, but Dick remains the most constant. 3 major things that have helped me in the past year, and some odd months, since I got out of the hospital. 1, and most importantly, is the continuous support from my husband, my family, and my friends. 2, and this may sound silly, but Jared Padalecki started the Always Keep Fighting campaign. It was great to see someone famous not only admit that they deal with depression, but also start a campaign where people could support one another. There are days when I'm tired of fighting this every day. and I look at my phone where I have this picture saved that comes from an interview Jared did. It says there's no shame in having to fight every day. If you're still alive to hear these words or read this interview, then you're winning your war. You're here. It reminds me that the fighting is important, that keeping that will to fight every day is a great accomplishment. I've also been helped by the campaign started by Misha Collins and Jensen Ackles. You are not alone, because it started a support system for people within the supernatural family who needed it, and that acceptance helps. 3, I found peer support. This time last year, I had no idea what peer support was or that it even existed. But thanks to a wonderful therapist who recommended I check out my local peer support center for a job, I found this amazing concept. My entire life, I wanted to take all the bad things that had happened and use them to help others. I thought the way to do that was to get a degree and become a therapist. Which, don't get me wrong, is still a vital service, but it's not what I wanted to do. In my experience, in both seeing therapists and studying to be one, using personal experience is not encouraged and sometimes frowned upon. I don't know, to me, if something good can come out of all the suffering, then maybe it's not all that bad, maybe it happened for a reason. So last October, I got hired and went to training to become a certified peer support specialist. I got certified last November, and it's been one of the best things to happen to me. Top 10, for sure. I truly feel like I'm helping people, even if I'm only giving them someone to listen. Though I will not provide specifics as to where I live, I will tell you I live in the state of Georgia, and I'm lucky that Georgia is the current front runner in peer support. If you live in Georgia and you're interested in peer support services, there's info in the description. Last year, I thought I was better, or at least better enough to go off meds. There were other reasons I wanted to be off meds, but they're not important to this video. I talked to my psychiatrist, weaned myself off the medications, and went without any, both psychological meds and meds for physical problems. Over the past month or so, I've noticed myself falling back into the person I was before I tried to kill myself. So I went back on meds. So far, I'm at 10 pills a day, with a strong possibility of more coming down the line. As of now, only 2 of them are psych meds. What can I say? My body sometimes sucks at functioning the way it's supposed to. When I went back on meds, I was informed that some time ago I was diagnosed with PTSD. Considering my past and knowing the symptoms of PTSD, wasn't really surprised, but I do wish they would have told me when they gave me the diagnosis. There is a real chance I'll have another diagnosis in a few weeks for the voices, which have currently gone undiagnosed. Maybe not. I don't know. Now going back to how I started this video. I've entertained the idea of doing this for a long time. When I first considered it, I even went out and bought a mask so I could do it anonymously. But there was a life event a few months ago that woke me up. I lost my dear friend Timmy to suicide in January. Yeah, the Timmy that turned me in and saved my life. And all I could think of was if I had tried to share my story more, if I had put myself out there, if I had done more, then maybe he would have realized that there were other options. Maybe he would have realized he wasn't alone. So here I am, putting myself out there in front of all of you. Because if I can help someone by risking embarrassment or nerves, then it's worth it. So come on, people. Comment below or message me your questions. While I encourage all questions, I will say please be respectful. No personal questions. Well, no questions about my personal life, names, places, etc. But feel free to ask me anything about my life with mental illness.